Hi, this is Jamie Flinchball, host of the People Solve Problems podcast, author of People Solve Problems, and I'm here to talk with Justin Max about problem solving. So, Justin, how you doing?
Good, Jamie. How are you, man?
I'm great. So Justin is the founder of Spark DSG, digital design and development agency based in Pennsylvania. Justin and his team at Spark apply their ideas process to solve complex business problems with measurable outcomes, which is really really cool way to describe your value proposition. So we know each other quite well from soccer. Justin was my assistant coach for many years, and two of us would stand by the touch line, with our hands on our hips, wondering what went wrong. So and what problem to solve. And he also gave me one of my favorite quotes about my book, which when after he read it, he said, "Oh, I was expecting a bunch of wonky lean stuff, but it actually applied to me," which I actually loved because I definitely didn't want to write a wonky book, but something that people can find does apply to what they do. So appreciate the quote.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
So let's
Yeah,
talk about, I mean, just part of your value proposition is essentially problem solving, right? And so this ideas process, solving complex business problems. So just tell me about the ideas process and how what you're doing with that to help your clients.
sure. So on that, I would actually back up just a step. So I'm a founder of a business, but a founder who was a practitioner first. So I was a designer initially, and built my business out of quality work, delivering for clients, and we built it organically. So it grew and evolved over the years, and in that course of time, if I had to do it again, I would have gotten out of the weeds quite a bit earlier. So for me, the ideas process came out of a realization that I was taking on too many tasks in our organization, and and I owe you a little bit of credit here, Jamie, because we had you speak to my leadership team when we were doing an offsite, and you were going over some of the primary principles in your book. And one of the things we were talking about was gaps, right? Strategic gaps, process gaps, people gaps. And I realized around that time I wasn't going to be able to scale the business much further without addressing some of the things that were missteps from just growing organically, right? So we actually had a little bit of strategy gap. We had a great team, but the main thing was a process gap, right? So we had a way of doing things, but it wasn't documented. It was a little bit overly custom for each and every project brief that came in. So as a team, we sat down and we first audited everything that we were doing, just to kind of understand all the steps that we had in place. And we realized that we did have kind of a repeatable pattern, but it wasn't anything that was like documented in any sort of formal way.
Right.
A lot of it sat in my head, or the directors on my team in their heads, and so it wasn't really something that any team member could kind of pick up. So the ideas process, it's just a nice clean acronym for marketing purposes, but it's initiate, discover, execute, assess, and support. So in our work as a design and technology firm, we're mostly solving more complex digital experience problems. So for us, the initiate portion is really the onboarding and kind of setting things up for success, making sure we have a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, RACI, that sort of thing. The problem solving for us, you might think it's in the execute portion, but for our agency, a lot of it is in discover, right? Like trying to get a foundational understanding of our clients, the specific problems that they might have, the technology landscape, composition of their teams, and how we'll interface with their internal, team. And we're doing that in discover. Execute is really, it's tactical. It's agile methodology, rolling through a set of design and development tasks to build the digital product. And then assessment is the tricky one in our process because honestly, it happens along the whole process.
Right.
It happens even in discovery when we're just validating like early stage prototyping. But it happens throughout the entire execute process, and then at the end, it's just kind of a formal assessment process we go through, whether it's a quality assurance, formal quality assurance. Our clients do a UAT process, and we're just making sure that the product that we're going to put out in the market meets all the goals that we had set up initially.
Yeah.
And then support is, for our clients where we're doing some large scale build, we're oftentimes then on some sort of maintenance agreement or supporting the work strategically over time. So the very cool thing about the process, though, is it's end to end, so it's comprehensive, like at least against our service offering. But the way that we engineered it and designed it, it can be broken up. So we have some project engagements that are just discover or just execute, right? And then within that, we have a whole workflow of our specific tasks, and each of those can be broken off. So sometimes, for instance, we might be doing like a usability study on an existing product, and that's just a node within our overall workflow, and we can break that off, and we can put a statement of work around just one specific node. So it's been pretty scalable, and it's been great for the team because we have taken that into like a level of documentation that has RACI and goals and templates for each and every step. So it's been a bit of a game changer for the team in terms of clarity and how we do things.
Yeah, love that. And I like to say that problem solving isn't a capability; it's a collection of a bunch of capabilities. And as you kind of described that, since in a lot of ways problem solving is your value proposition for your customers, you don't have just one set capability. You kind of have, here's the pieces that maybe your client has the capability around. Here's the pieces that you're going to add into their problem solving process, and so it allows you to be flexible, but sort of maintain that core structure of the things that you do. Because that's you have the capabilities to solve it, but it's also figuring out the problem, right? That whole discovery process and framing it in the right way. Which if you don't do that, it doesn't matter how well you execute, right? You're solving the wrong problem. So
yeah, for sure.
And I love that it all began from a problem statement around scalability, right? Just sort of understanding what's going to allow you to scale, and this happens to a lot of business owners. I know I'm guilty of it in the past and present. Is when we also do the work, right? When we sort of grow the business by doing the work, it's hard to let go of some of those things, and so the role of a founder in solving our own problems can be quite challenging, because there's a right way in our head, right? That doesn't always approach. So let me ask you about your role as you go forward, especially with the ideas program and structure and how you scale. How do you think about your role in problem solving, your team's role? How do you decide what to care about so much that you want to be involved and own the problem versus just, what, I trust you guys, we have a framework, you guys go do that.
Yeah, it's
about that challenge.
No, it's a really good question. So I think some of it, and I'm probably speaking again from this perspective of like practitioner turned business owner, it takes a while to release wanting to have your hands on the solution. So over the years, and I'm actually June 1st is our 12-year anniversary. So it's been a minute. So I have learned that I enjoy, it goes back to coaching kind of, Jamie. Like I enjoy getting the pieces in the right place and having a culture, like designing a culture, as much as I enjoy sort of just the actual design solution. So some of it was like a mental shift for myself about thinking about, well, what is my value here, right? Because it used to be conceptually or strategically thinking about the design solution and executing that. And now, I'm still involved in strategy on our core accounts, occasionally, but really my job now is to create like the environment for the rest of the team to be able to do their best work. So, when I first started it, I thought that would be like, I want a bunch of folks who are like me, jack of all trades, um, sort of able to think about things from multiple angles. And honestly, if you're a founder, you've probably done almost every job in your organization at some point in time.
Hmm.
I've learned that it's better as the organization grows. Let's have some clarity around your role, value that specialization. And for me, I don't know if this works for everyone, but I think empowering folks to fail is super important. Like we have a value system we put in place, and I will tell the team constantly, if you're doing something earnestly and you're following our values, failure is all right as long as you're in that value framework.
Hmm.
Now, if it's repeated and we're not correcting it, we have to talk about that. But
Sure.
so that's also been like, along with the process, the ideas process, um, creating a culture where folks aren't afraid to try things. Um, and, and 9 times out of 10, though, it works positively. It's usually not a negative thing. So that's been a shift. So my role these days is, it's company strategy. Unfortunately, it's still sales. I'm actually trying to create a repeatable process on sales right now so that I can offload that. That's my
Mhm.
my goal for this year. Um, so vision, culture, strategy is really the space that I want to be playing in as a leader. And then it's still sales. So it's still sales and marketing, and that's something I'm trying to figure out how to offload. That would
Yeah.
be, yeah,
Well, I think it's important recognition that your role can change and evolve based on the needs of the organization.
yep,
So some of that's necessary, right? So if you hadn't changed your role, probably couldn't scale the business. Um, and then a couple of ways to think about it is: do I change my role to what I'm good at? Do I change my role to what I want to do? Right. Where
hmm
as founders, we may get a little more degrees of freedom to change it to what we want to do.
hmm
But I would also argue if that feeds your energy, then that's a positive thing for the organization as well. So,
Well, what's interesting, actually, real quick on that front, I've learned for myself to do things like sales. I'm like, let me step back. I'm naturally an introvert. I've learned to be extroverted. Um, but I've learned to be extroverted in ways that work for me.
mhm.
So, for instance, on the sales side, I like to get into consultation quickly because it takes me back to being a designer and solving a problem.
Right.
Right. So my sales is even problem solving.
Hmm.
Uh, I prefer to do that than to do some big spiel about why we're the best. I just want to demonstrate it.
Yep. And that
So,
puts the DNA of the company out at the forefront, which
yeah,
works, right? So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
fantastic. So, you've had some things that work, some things that didn't. And I love war stories. I think we all get to learn a lot from those. Do you have an example of poorly done problem solving you can sort of share the lessons from, like what's gone wrong and how'd you learn and adjust from it?
Well, I can, on the client side, what's interesting is I see a trend, a theme. We see a bunch of themes actually. There's one on the startup side, there's one on the corporate side, but on the startup side, we work with a lot of um, companies that they're are they true startups? They're still in a growth mode, but they're into their Series A
Sure.
plus rounds of funding.
They operate like definitely operating like a startup.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But what happens there a lot of times is we're working with tech founders who usually come from an engineering background, so like me, but the other side of the fence.
Right.
Um, and they oftentimes have figured out an engineering solve for some problem that's in a space that they worked in. So they develop a prototype, um, they go get their funding, another round of funding, start to build a team, launch a product, get some traction, right? Get a user base. And this happens over like, year, 2 years, 3 years. Next thing they know, after servicing this client base for like a couple of years and handling basically support tickets, asking for additional features, functionality, um, what was once like a focused product that went to market to solve a specific thing has become this spaghetti ball of features, functionality, unclear focus on what the product actually does and serves. And that manifests in a terrible user experience, terrible UI.
Right.
Um, so we see that like all the time. And we're brought um, in the best instances to kind of take a step back and reevaluate from a user standpoint, like what is their actual need? What is the value proposition of the business, and where does that intersect in terms of like the product?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we design for that and solve for that? In the worst cases, it's just lipstick on a pig.
Mm-hmm.
It's, hey, our product doesn't feel modern anymore. What can you do here? So it's like we try and consult our clients out of that mode of thinking, because there's no amount of like CSS visual design update that's going to course correct for like years of layered
Right.
chasing the thing right in front of you.
Yeah.
So that's something we see all the time. And then, you know, on the corporate side, it's really, the story is more about, it's about bloat. So we've had some clients, they'll approach us, and I can't name names, but they might have a design and development team that is like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5x our team.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at the CVs of the folks that they have on their team. I'm like, well, this is a skilled team. This is a competent team.
Right.
Like, why do you actually need us? And they need us because there's something like institutionally in that organization where they just don't have time, or they're not empowered to solve the real problems that are in front of them. So, it's always amazing to me the dollars that are spent on not addressing like core issues, as opposed to bringing in us to layer on top of the spend to try and do something that's outside of the organization, just because they're internal, they can't get it done.
Yeah.
So we've seen that sort of thing, and in the worst cases, it's we need to launch this solution on a hosted environment that's not even in our internal, just because it will never happen. It won't get done, or it will get done in a year. So like these sorts of things that happen at scale, we get brought in to kind of triage that as well. So, it happens at both ends of the spectrum in terms of the client size and team size. But
yeah, it's interesting. It's a lot of companies, once they have enough work just to keep the trains running, that their team's so busy keeping the train running, they're like, oh, well, we have new interesting work to do. We'll go ask somebody else to do that.
yeah.
And I sometimes just, well, why don't you do the opposite? Why don't you go hire an outsourced resource to help you keep the trains running, and your team gets to go do the new and interesting, challenging stuff. But
Well, what's tricky there, Jamie, is like when we come into that environment, how do you keep allies and advocates for you as the vendor when I don't want to say jealousy, but there's a level of like, well, we're competent, why are you bringing in these guys?
Yeah,
right?
You're doing the cool work that they always wanted to do. Right?
Yeah. But at the same time, like, because of the way it had been, they're used to working at a pace that is very slow.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our value to our corporate clients is the pace at which we work, because we're smaller, we're more nimble, and this is what we do. Like, we get in, we identify the problems, and we produce solutions for them, and we get out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, we're about out of time, but I do want to ask you one more quick question because I noticed your team recently went on a little summit and trip, and I know how important team culture is, and so I'd love to just get your quick thoughts on what you do to build a collaborative team environment, especially as the organization's leader.
Yeah, cool. So things have changed a little bit over the years. We had an office, everyone was in the office, traditional kind of setup. We were hybrid prior to the pandemic, 3 days in the office, 2 from home. And then we went fully remote with the pandemic. So which has been great because I have talent from all over the country now and folks I wouldn't have been able to connect with. But it is real that there really is not a replacement for like real FaceTime with people in real life. So we have run 2 Spark Summits, which is just an annual offsite multi-day get together. And it's a split, honestly, it's a split of like work focused workshops and then just team bonding.
Yep.
Really just trying to like create collisions for people who don't get to be together.
Right.
And it's so valuable. So we invest like the amount we would have put into our office space, we invest that back into just doing this big bash. Year one was all about the ideas process, actually, rolling that out, getting everyone on board, making sure we understood it, and we just figured out some ways to do that in kind of an engaging fashion. This year we did a bit of like almost like you would do a hackathon or design-a-thon. We did a multi-day team-based competition around product strategy and product development, which was really cool because it had a little bit of competitive juice to it. And and we also mix in some just like sort of design thinking exercises as well. So it's not a static, we're not sitting in the conference room, me presenting to the team. I'm creating an environment for folks to have interactions, get to know each other, and then also put some of our process into practice in a fun way. So it's super cool because folks who might not have met each other in person, they're meeting each other, person, they're creating memories. And I feel like there's even though those sorts of informal interactions, on the surface, it's like just kind of hanging out, but I see it pay off when we're back in a remote setting and folks are in Slack. They're more apt to reach out to one another, to ask a question, to bounce, they might be designing something, they'll more likely to bounce it off their colleague and say, hey, what do you think of this? And that colleague, it feels more open and free to be like, that's total shit. You should not do that. Have you thought about this? And that I don't think would happen as naturally if we didn't invest that time in sort of the remote summits.
That's awesome. I like to say, connection and culture are 2 of the major things you need to spend in-person time on, and doesn't have to be a lot, but it's hard to get connection and culture 100% remote if you don't have some of that in touch time. So you leverage it as hard as you can when you have the opportunities, and so it sounds like a great approach to do that. So thanks.
Yeah. We have a couple other rituals we have in place that are virtual based. Like we use a tool called 15-5 for one-on-ones and high fives and all that kind of stuff. We use Slack, but at the end of the day, it's helpful to bridge that gap between in-person time, but there's no substitute.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts, your stories, your experiences. Wish you and the Sparks team all the best, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Thanks for listening to the People Solve Problems podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. Visit jflinch.com for more episodes and other content. And continue to join us on your podcast app, of course. We greatly appreciate your feedback through reviews and ratings. Consider expanding your understanding of problem solving with Jamie's book, People Solve Problems: The Power of Every Person, Every Day, Every Problem. Available on Amazon. Until next time, keep learning, innovating and solving problems.